So, Jordan, I would like to know the origin story.
My origin story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's go all the way to the beginning, my friend.
So I was raised in an LDS family. I'm adopted, and
I didn't know this.
so I'm adopted, and I was adopted to an LDS family, and I, I guess like my queer origin story is, I started realizing that I was queer in junior high, because there was a set of really cute twins in my junior high, and
Their names?
that's not going to be disclosed on here. But so I started like realizing that I had attraction to men, and I didn't really do anything with that until after high school. So it's quite like a long period of time to have it, like this realization, but not really do anything with it. In fact, I quote unquote dated a girl in high school for like all 3 years mostly. And it was interesting because we were really good friends. And I think when you are in Utah and you have someone of the opposite sex that you hang out with a lot and do fun things with, right? That's dating, right? Since I put it in quotations. So we dated all throughout high school. And then at the end of high school, I, started dating men. And it was really interesting because at the same time, I was also prepping for a mission. So I was putting in mission papers, and it was a little bit like there was a wait time in between submitting papers and leaving, because I had a little stint of like anorexia in my senior year. And so there was some time frame where they were like, okay, because you've had this, you need to have a specific like window of time after any symptoms or behaviors in order to be eligible for the mission.
What year were you doing this? Like the whole mission thing?
It was, I think, around April of 2017 is kind of when this is dated. So
Wow.
relatively recently. And so I started dating men, and I got my mission call, and I was called to Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Before you go on, I'm curious to know. So you said that you realized that you were queer in high school, and is the being brought up in LDS culture, how was that? How was that in that sense, and then how compared to how it was when you started dating men after high school? Because I feel like there's a pretty big difference between those two time periods.
Right.
And I'd like to know
I don't think it
a little bit
really
more.
impacted me during that time, like the in between time. I think I just kind of shoved it down and was like, this is not going to impact me. It wasn't really anything that influenced my life. Like I wasn't dating anybody, right? So I wasn't actively.
Was it hard to like reconcile the fact that you're like, oh, I'm LDS and I'm gay, like in that time frame?
I think like the after high school time frame is like really when it hit me, and
Interesting.
so well, and it was very like catalytic, right? Like it was kind of just all happened at once. And so my mission papers were in, and I ended up deciding not to serve a mission 3 days before I was supposed to leave on a mission. So it was the Sunday before the Wednesday I was supposed to leave. It was conference Sunday. And so my farewell was like a month before. So everyone in the ward knew. And even on that conference Sunday in the priesthood session, the elders were like, Jordan headed out on a mission on Wednesday. And at that time, in that moment, I was still planning on going. So I was like, yeah, of course. Like, it's going to be so great. And then that night,
Plot twist.
right. And then that night, things changed. And I was like, I'm not going to go on a mission. I can't do this, basically.
What switched?
So, like I said, I was dating someone at the time, and it was interesting because there was a point in time where my dad found out about this. He actually read my Facebook messages to my friends.
Oh, wow.
And he approached me about this and was like, hey, do you have anything to tell me? And I was like, no. And he's like, are you hanging out with anyone new? And I was like, no. And he kind of just like kept pushing on that idea. And eventually, he was like, I know about, this person that you're dating. And it really caught me off guard. And I got really, really offended because he told me, you shouldn't be serving a mission. Like, you're not worthy of it, basically, right now. And that really hurt me. Interestingly enough, I ended up driving to the Bountiful Temple, and I was like, it was raining, I remember, and I was just like, what do you want from me, basically? Like, I'm trying my best. Nothing has happened sexually. Like, there's not really like anything that I'm doing that's breaking the laws of the church, right, at this point. And so I was like, like, what do you want from me? And I ended up spending most of the night over at a friend's, and then I ended up coming back to my family, and they all were very like jarred from it and felt really bad about what had occurred. And so that was like their start of their conversion to being okay with, queer identity. And
did anyone know before this? Like, were you?
Yeah, so I told my
been out for a
sister,
while, or-
I had told some friends of mine. I believe our bishop had known at the time as well, because in fact, our bishop was like, talked to my dad and was basically like, he hasn't broken any like laws of the church currently, so like it doesn't affect his mission worthiness. And so, yeah, I just decided I wasn't going to go. And
Nice.
I came out to my family over text message, like my whole extended
Whole family?
family. And I was like, hey, like, I'm going to be posting on Facebook about this on Thursday.
Yeah,
because,
I was gonna say. I thought you had also.
yeah. And, I'm going to be posting about this, on Facebook on Thursday. And I want you guys to know ahead of time. But this is kind of what's going on. I experienced same-sexual attraction, and
Is that how you said it?
same-sex attraction? Same-sex attraction, yeah. So
Did that feel like good at the time?
no, but it felt like what was the best, like the lightest.
Like the easiest way to just
Right.
break the news. Gotcha. Makes sense.
And so I came up to my family, and then that Thursday, because I was very active in my community, I walked my dog all the time, and everyone in the ward sort of knew me, right? I was very out and about, outgoing. And so I was like, everyone's going to ask me about that. I'm going to get stopped walking my dog, and they're like, it's Thursday. Aren't you supposed to have like left on your mission by now? Like,
Yeah, right. Like
what's happening? And so that Thursday I posted on Facebook, and I said, hey, everybody, like, you're probably shocked to see a post from me because I should have been in the MTC yesterday. And here's what's going on. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them, but I don't know, like, I may not be able to answer all of your questions because I myself am trying to figure this out. And I got a lot of good responses and good feedback. In fact, a lady in my ward who I'm still very close to, she was like, hey, I know of this other queer Mormon who's like still in the church and has kind of like figured out his stuff and gone through his process, and I'd love to have you two over for dinner so you guys can talk and like.
That's so sweet.
Right. And so
Did you?
I did actually.
Sweet.
Accepted her offer and met with this individual, and it was a really good process. And it ended up being like, I decided that this was kind of a lot for me to kind of like I said, it was very like all at once.
Makes sense.
And so I was like, I need to go to therapy. Like I need to I need to figure this out because
That's a fair.
this is too much. I have to go to therapy for this. So
Good job.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you. That is an amazing decision.
I went to go see a therapist actually that I had met from LDS Family Services, because they screened me. They had to screen me for the anorexic tendencies. So I'd already seen this individual, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like go to this person and see what they have to say. And they were actually very open about it. They basically told me, we're all just like floating on this sphere, and we have to figure out what's right for us and where to go. And people think it's very black and white, and it's not. And there's a lot of gray area, and it's your job to explore this gray area at this time, right? That you can go and maybe you start dating men, and maybe, you decide that you don't like that, and so you want to come back to church. Maybe you start going to church and you find out that's not quite right for you. And, there's a lot of things that you can tinker and kind of like investigate and figure out what's right for you, but it's not so black and white as everyone kind of paints it to be.
Makes it seem to be, yeah.
And so that
That's
was
some good
really,
advice, yeah.
it was very impactful for me. And he also was like, let me see if I can find some support for you. And so he was like, let me check some sources, right? So he didn't actually know of any like good queer friendly LDS intersection resources. And neither did my parents. My parents obviously had no idea.
And this is still in 2017, right? Like it's...
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense.
And my parents didn't know anything. My bishop was like, I know MormonGay.org, and I never read it, but I know that it exists. And I was like, thank you. Very much appreciate that.
So helpful.
Right. So I basically didn't know anything, and my therapist ended up coming back and said, hey, there's two groups. There's one here kind of in North Ogden kind of area, or there's one in Salt Lake, and here's kind of the information both of them. And I ended up deciding that the one in Salt Lake was kind of more aligned with my beliefs, and it was called Men Finding Peace, which is like a support group for gay Mormon men. And I started going, and that was really instrumental for me. I ended up finding a lot of community. A lot of my current friend circle still comes from the group of people that I met there. And
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was so good to find a community. And I ended up finding out that there's like a whole lot of other resources here in the state. Like I found from Men Finding Peace, I found North Star, and from North Star I found like Affirmation and Encircle, and like there's all these other resources. And that was kind of a big light bulb moment for me.
Right.
Was that, wow, there's like a ton of resources out there that I had no idea about.
It's not just Mormon and gays.
Right. There's a whole ton of different resources, and resources that cater to different folks and different identities and different ideologies and demographics. And it's just, there was like this big collection that I didn't realize was there. And I don't think a lot of queer people in Utah, especially when they're first coming out, don't realize that there is such a large network.
So is this kind of the moment where you decided to gear towards wanting to build the resource database that you have now?
I think I started realizing that there wasn't a lot of like a mainstream process to find resources, and I was really starting to get involved in a lot of different resources. And that's kind of where my queer journey also takes off as well. As I started getting involved with these resources, I had this idea for this database and actually pushed it off for a long time. Like it was probably 2 years later when I actually started working on it.
Really?
And
oh, okay.
Up until then, I really just started getting involved in as many like queer organizations as I could. So I helped North Star as well as Encircle with like program design for some of their conferences. So I helped in that space. I ended up starting a queer support group for millennial aged individuals along with some friends. So we were kind of like the executive committee for that, and we actually ran it for about 6 months until a lot of us got super busy. And
wow.
But we
life happens.
Right. But yeah, we ran it up at the U hospital, and we just had it in one of their rooms, and we just had people come and had speakers, and we kind of had it on a cycling weekly cadence. So we had some, like 1 week was thoughtfulness and like mindfulness, and 1 week was about discussing like queer issues. One was sort of like a group discussion, and like kind of anybody could bring up something that happened to them or they wanted to talk about. And then we had like a monthly speaker that would come and like share their story.
That's super cool. Like, and you had all volunteers just do that then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just like a group of me and my friends
that
just got together and were like, you know what, we feel like there's not a group for our age bracket, and so we're gonna create one. And we just invited people, and it got pretty big. Like there was a good amount of us, right? Like that came consistently, and so
that's cool.
We did that. I started getting introduced to the Utah Hearth, which is like a speaker series group. They have speakers that come every month and talk about the intersection of queerness and Mormonism, and I ended up becoming an executive committee member there. And I think all of it sort of stemmed from that idea of like, I want to understand these resources. I want to understand what's out there. I want to create where there's lack, right? So the idea of the group, which is called True to Me, that support group was created in that idea, in that vein. And so the next step to that was, okay, how do we sort of streamline this process? Like,
was that group the True to Me group? That's the one that was at the U of U hospital? Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was the name. Sorry about that.
You're good. So I was like, how do we streamline this process? It took me, like I said, probably, quite a long time to get embedded and get an understanding of what was out there. And I found a lot of value from the community, right? Like, I found really good friends. I found people to look up to and sort of like mentors and individuals that I connected with and related with in this community. And I felt like, man, if someone could get this like so much sooner, it would save them so much time, so much energy.
So much heartache, yeah.
Right. And how do we go about doing this? Because there's, instead of having a bishop that says, oh, I just know more on gay.org, like, I would love it to be, oh, you just came out, here's this like business card, and just go to this website and you're set to go.
Right.
And you can just go and explore all these things, right? And I think the idea was there are a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of different resources that cater to different individuals, whether you're like in the church, out of the church, what like demographic you are. So are you a gay man? Are you, transgender? Where are those resources for you? And you kind of have to like look for them. You either have to know somebody who knows, or you have to like go online and search them out. And it was really inefficient and really just difficult for people. And I think it's still a big issue, right? Like, people...
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's still hard to find.
Right. And it takes time to say, okay, is this near me, right? Like, you can look up queer resources in Utah, and you might live in Washington County and you find some resource, but it's up in Ogden, you know? And so it doesn't really like fit for you. And
then even going and figuring out if you vibe with it.
Right. And so the idea was like, how do we streamline this? And so I was like, there needs to be an app for this. There needs to be an app that people can just go and find queer resources, and it should be something that helps, like, personalizes it to them or helps them find things that they're looking for. And so it was really like January of 2020 is when I was like, I need to build this app. And I'd had this idea for a long time, even like back when True to Me was happening, which was like a year and a half prior. I was like making sort of like little demos of it, or like basically just like landing pages, like not even any like app content, just UIs for it. And in January of 2020, I was like, I actually need to like work on this. Like, this needs to be a priority. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start this. So I launched a business called The Agenda, and I want it to be kind of like a joke.
Very nice.
To be like, oh, I want to help The Agenda.
10 out of 10, man.
And so I launched this business called The Agenda LLC, and I was like, okay, I'm going to like help queer Utahns. And I had this gusto. And then this was in 2020. So March of 2020 rolls in, and COVID happens.
Yep.
And it was good for me though, right?
I was gonna say, did it help you get more focused, or did it seem to make things more
it did
spastic and
it did
chaotic?
Two things. So one, it opened up some new opportunities to help the community like directly. So we launched two things at the time. I did like a mask donation project, so people could donate masks, and then I would actually, on my website that I had that was like supposed to be for the app, but it hadn't been built out yet. We just had like this splash page that was like, hey, get updates about this cool project and like track it, basically put in your email address. I ended up putting a place where people could go online and order masks and say like how many they needed and what style, because we had several different styles. And then I would just go in my car and I would drop off masks to people.
Oh, you would go do it. That's crazy.
So we just had this like, I would collect it. We had like 2 individuals who donated masks, and we just like collected them, and then we would put it on the website as like inventory, and we would say, like, select what mask you want, and we had different sizes and different like styles. And so that was one of the projects. The other project during COVID was, I felt like as a resource, we're stronger together, and that's kind of a theme that is played out throughout both like my life and this business. But it's like we're stronger together. And if you remember, there was a lot of panic buying at the time, and like you couldn't find toilet paper
for like months.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, other people have toilet paper, and we basically just need to like give it, like just redistribute these items to people that need them. And so I ended up having it be where people would submit a Google form to me and say like, this is kind of where I live, like this is my address. Do I have COVID symptoms or not? What do I need? Am I willing to contribute money to this? and I'd post it in a Facebook group, and people would be like, oh, I have this, or I've checked my Walmart and they actually had this, so I'll pay for it. And then we would collect these items and then give them to other individuals. So we'd like redistribute these items
Oh, wow.
to these individuals. And
That's
so,
cool.
Yeah.
And you did, like, would you also deliver those things?
It depended. Like, if people were like, oh yeah, I have this item and I live in this area, then we'd have them just kind of like we would have them deliver it first.
Right.
But like if it needed to be collected, oftentimes I was the one like collecting them and delivering them to people. So it did give me the opportunity to, kind of like focus and like build out the application, right? Like there's a lot of this time where you couldn't like go outside. You were under literally a quarantine mandate. And so it was like, well, what else do I do in this time? Like, I don't know. There's nothing else to do.
Right, things to do, right?
So I started building out this app, and it went through a lot of iterations. So one of the things that I was like, okay, we need to make this personalized to people. I was like, we should have these things called compatibility quotients, which is like a ridiculous word. And that's what it started with. And it was basically like, we should score this, like religious prominence and like engagement and all these things, and basically give people like a quick number to be like, oh, okay, like this is a 9 and I'm really like a 5 on like religion, so this might not be the best resource for me. And that's kind of where it started. And then I realized, oh, wow, this is like a ridiculous name, and also this is too complicated for me to throw into production. And so I was like, okay, what's next? And then I thought, okay, well, maybe a compatibility quiz, kind of like a BuzzFeed quiz. You would like go through and say like, this is what I think, quiz. And just click on the pictures and jump through, right? And then it would say, oh, wow, based upon these answers, like here's resources that we'd recommend to you.
Okay. That's cool.
And that worked to some extent. It worked a lot better than compatibility quotients, but it was like, this isn't really like intuitive enough, and also it like puts all these resources in these like very tight boxes, and so it wasn't like
that's a good point.
Helpful. Like if we gave you recommendations, it was like 1 or 2, right? Because it was so narrowed down.
Right. And it also, I guess it would be hard because it put like the responsibility of finding that right resource for the person in your hands.
Right. And I don't feel like I'm not the person to do that. Everyone needs to be able to figure out their own resources, and so
I don't think you can like metric your way to
that. And so then the idea was, okay, why don't we break this down in different ways? So like I put it in an app February of last year, so February 2021. Thank you.
You're almost at a year.
Yeah.
What day? What was the day?
It was actually, I stole from Encircle, and I launched it on Valentine's Day. So they were opening the St. George house on Valentine's Day. And so that was the previous year. So that was in 2019 or in 2020.
Right.
And so they did that. So I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna launch on Valentine's Day. And so I launched. It was this very basic app that basically just had all the resources. It actually wasn't even like super colored. It was like very like black and white UI that was just, it wasn't anything fancy, but it was out there, right? And I think that's like the important part. Like as you try to make a contribution to the world, right? No matter like who you are or what you're trying to do, I think it's good to just like basically like start with a rapid prototype. Like it doesn't need to be perfect, and I think we often aim for that perfection in what we do.
Perfect first product type of thing.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, I don't want people to see this because like, what if it's not right, and what if I can't?
Or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Like, and so I think it's like you just have to like start. Like 1, start, and 2, like just get it out there and get it like in the world, and you have time to iterate. It's not like the first thing that you put out in the world. It
has to be permanent.
Right. Yeah. It has to be exactly like what you intended it to be, right? And so I put out this idea, and instead of the compatibility quiz, we just did it by location, demographic, and like category of resource. And so that was kind of where it started.
Much more simpler.
Right. And since then it's kind of grown, and we've done a lot of different things with it, and we onboarded you to the program. And why don't you tell me a little bit about like why, like where your journey starts, because you're not queer, you're straight, you're an ally.
Correct.
And like how did you get involved, and then like just in the queer community in general, and then like explain a little bit how you got involved with the organization.
I think the first time that I was like exposed to someone who was gay was one of my friends in high school. And I remember it was me and my buddy and this friend, and we were all in the same friend group, and we were driving around. I'm from St. George, and so we were driving around one night, and we were just chatting, and he came out to me and, you know, said I was gay, and I was like, cool. Like, I was a very like basic human, I guess. It kind of was like, I knew it was a big deal, but I was also like, I don't see you any differently. But we had a conversation, and he was like, do you think I'm going to go to hell? And I remember being in that moment, being conflicted, because like personally, I was thinking, no, I don't think so. Like, it doesn't, like, I'm not the person who decides that factor. And then I remember thinking at the time, because I grew up LDS, I was like, well, according to LDS standards, you wouldn't, like, just by virtue of being gay, it would depend on like how you acted in this life. And that's the answer that I told him, which I'm like, in hindsight, I wish I would have gone with like my intuition, but you do it with what you can. And so that was like my first experience with a person who was gay, and it wasn't like this really grand revolutionary, like, oh my gosh, like gay people are human too. Like, it was, nothing changed in that regard. But as I got older, I just got more and more exposed to people who are within the queer community. And so like on my mission, it seemed like every area that I went to, I had made friends with like a lesbian couple. And we were always like homies, like we were friends. and it was cool. I don't know, like I always just found it very unorthodox, which suits me pretty well. And then coming home from my mission, I had a friend of a friend who had come home from his mission, and he had put out that he'd come home for like mental health things, but part of those things was that he was struggling with his like queer identity and being gay while being LDS. And so I saw him at UVU, and so I guess let me cycle back. I moved from St. George to UVU after my mission, and I met him. That's how I met him. And I had him and another friend who I was like, hey, I'm going into psychology. I want to be a therapist. And I had this weird idea of like, if I'm going to be a therapist, I got to like understand the LGBTQ community. I don't know like why that specifically, because there's like so many other communities I didn't know either. But that was the one that I was like, I got to figure that out. And so those are my two people that I asked all of my stupid questions with. And like they helped me understand more about like what it was like to be queer in LDS, which I'm like eternally grateful for, because they really helped me understand. And like, I don't want to say that I like had negative biases or like negative thought processes around queer people and like being an LDS person, but I just didn't know. Like, I had no idea what it was like, and I had no idea what that experience was like. And so it was just really nice to have a person to ask all my stupid questions to. And that year was actually 2017, and was when when Provo and Circle House like was first released, I guess you can say. And I was on this mini research hunt still of wanting to learn about queer experiences. And so I signed up as a volunteer. I still am a volunteer technically. I get their emails and everything. And I went to their volunteer training thing. And I don't remember who was teaching it. I can't remember the name. But they did like a history of like queer history. And it was like so informative. It was like the first time that I had learned about like Stonewall and like history of queer people here in Utah, as well as like BYU, and the story of Encircle and how it came to be. And my notes were just so ignorantly cute, like just queer people are people too type of thing, like very ignorant. But you know, me learning that like they're not different. They're people, and they have their desires of wanting to just be accepted and seen in the world, just like I did and I do. And so that's kind of the beginnings of that. I went from volunteering in Encircle to working at an LGBTQ therapy office for a time in 2017, where I was like the office manager. So I met with I scheduled a lot of queer people's therapy, and that was a really interesting experience to be involved with that. It was also interesting to just see how like my parents reacted to this, because to me, I'm just like, oh yeah, like this all makes sense. Like I'm learning and growing, and this is just part of life or whatever. I didn't feel like I was acting against my LDS upbringing. But I remember having a few conversations with my dad where he was like, so like, why are you doing this? Like, are you sure they're not teaching you to be gay too? And I was like, Dad, that's not how that works. It was just really, it was an interesting thing, because I got to see what it was like to be queer in Utah, and I realized that there was a problem. Like I realized that it was a struggle. Like it wasn't like it was just easy. It wasn't like, oh, I can be queer in Utah and it's not that big of a deal. The way that I viewed it, there's a lot of stuff that I had no idea. Like the process and the struggle of even accepting that one person may be gay or queer or lesbian or whatever, you know? Learning about all that was very sobering. It was very sobering to learn of these like heartbreaking stories of people just like hating themselves, or thinking that God hates them, or like praying to be different when they were just fine as they were. They were beautiful, like wonderful individuals. And so I switched from psychology to family studies to eventually social work. And I would say like social work, my social work program at UVU is what really more drove a paradigm shift in general, not just with like LGBTQ people, but like I went from a more, I guess you can say, conservative outlook from when I was raised to a more progressive and just more open.
And then how did this like lead into like your research project?
Right. So that was the very last semester of my bachelor's program in social work. For some reason, I was like on top of a part-time job, full-time school, part-time internship. I want to throw in a research project. And so there's a institution or a program at UVU called like the Student Impact Center. I think that's the official one. I'm not entirely sure, but they basically walk you through and fund a research project. You pitch them an idea, and I like the way that it was presented seemed like it was an application. I don't know if they just accept all of them, but I filled an application, and I wanted to find basically the lack of LGBTQ resources, like where they lacked, because I knew there was a lack, but I wanted to be sure that I was getting it from the people who were using those resources instead of just what I thought where the lack was. And this came from because that old job, I was on a lot of referral companies' directories to call. And so I got a call from a referral directory for someone seeking LGBTQ therapy. I wasn't working at that job anymore. But they asked me, they were like, do you know of any other resources? And by that time, it had been a few years that I was with Encircle and working with that therapy office, that I had been exposed to a lot of things that were going on. And so I was like, I could probably do like a quick Google search and find whatever I'm missing and then send them. And I was very surprised that, I mean, like, I didn't spend like a deep dive, but like a few hours of a Google search, I had already known about the majority of the resources that were available. And I was like, there's no way that there's this little. And if there is, that's a problem. And so that inspired the idea of presenting this idea to the Impact Center at UVU. And they funded my research project, and I interviewed 20 participants. And I don't know how I found the time for it, but it was incredible, like meeting one-on-one with these people. And I tried to be as diverse as possible, because particularly with like ACE and transgender students in the Utah Valley area specifically, I wanted to get their perspective, as well as like persons of color and transgender ACE, or just more of those like fringe intersections that aren't necessarily talked about as much. I wanted to see if I can get more of that. And there were a lot of patterns that showed up, and there were a lot of interesting things, and there were a lot of answers that I didn't expect, and there were a lot of answers that I did expect. And it was just like an incredibly humbling and sacred experience to hear these people's stories and like what it was like for them to try to find help. And obviously, you could guess some people had a hard time finding help and finding that support, and some people didn't. And a lot of people, hurt and struggled. But the end result of that research project is you're supposed to present an actionable item to actually do in the community. And all of the things that I thought of were like very, legislature-y. Like, I was like, I don't know if I can do any of these things that would evoke like the next step action item type of thing. But I remember when my mentor at the time was like, well, you could always like, you could do an app, you could do like an educational thing, you could do classes or whatever. And that app idea was really interesting because I was like, I bet you anything it would be really helpful, because one of the patterns that showed up in that research project was that if there were resources, they weren't well advertised. And I was thinking that would be probably the easiest next step would be to make an app where basically you geotag all of the available resources. So if anyone wanted to know where they are, they could just pop open the app, look at it, and be like, oh, okay, like here's what's available. Little did I know that idea was already being taken by someone else. But one of my friends, I went to dinner with them one time, and I was beginning this process because I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been a one-man show this entire time. I don't really like know anyone that could potentially help me. I have people that could like give me ideas or like direction, but I was planning on doing this all by myself, like, which I know you did. I know you didn't talk about this, and I'm upset with you. You didn't talk about like the process of what you had to do to build this app, because it's incredible the time that you took. I'm just gonna say anyway. Basically, like you did what I was gonna do, and gather all of the resources manually and then put it into one place. And I was just explaining that to one of my friends. I was over for dinner, and his husband was like, oh yeah, someone's already doing that. Like I learned about this. And so this was like somewhere around April, May or June of 2020. Because I had graduated, I'd finished the project, I had submitted my final thing. And I was at dinner, and this guy was like, oh yeah, this guy named Jordan Jackson's already doing this. And I was like, what? Like, there's a little moment of like, like you stole my idea. And it's not gonna look as good. Like my thought process was like, I immediately don't trust this person to do it. I don't, like, my apologies, but that's just how I am.
It's fine.
And so he gave me your contact info, and then I looked at your website, and I was like, oh wait, no, this looks great. This looks fantastic. This is phenomenal. This is better than what I thought it was gonna, like what I had in mind. And so I had a moment where I was like, I could choose to like do my own thing, or I could choose to just like help this guy. And so I got your Facebook, and I had no plan of what I was going to talk to you about. I just like, my whole plan was, I'm going to get on a FaceTime call with this guy. I'm going to be like, hey, I want to help you. How can I help you? And that's essentially what we did. I mean, we had a little bit of scheduling conflict, but I think we officially like met in June of 2020 or somewhere around there, end of June. And I was in a hammock at my apartment complex, and I was like, hey Jordan, like I really like what you got going on. I have this research project that like backs up the importance of what you're doing, and I want to help. How can I help? And so we had a conversation where essentially I was like, well, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to do moving forward? And you were like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to do. And in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, I know people that could totally do this. And we decided that I would be your community engagement specialist, like liaison, basically to connect you with the people that I knew through like my social work experience. And that's how we got here. The rest is history. And it took off since then. I like my whole goal, and I think what we've done a really good job as a team going forward is that I didn't want it to be like it was a competition. Like my whole goal was, I don't really care if I get recognition for this. I think this is just good, period. And this guy's done all of the work necessary, and it's damn good work. First of all, like you explained the process of how you got to where you were and how good it looked from the first iteration. I mean, like I say this all the time, but I genuinely mean it. Like it blew me away. Like it is, I'm sure it was such hard work, so meticulous, so tedious, but like so good to have a place to start. And it looks so professional and beautiful as the way that you made it. And so, yeah, we talked about competition and collaboration, and we really wanted to embrace this idea of, let's just try to see if we can collaborate with as many people as possible and close those gaps.
Right.
And I think we've done a really good, like incredible job at that actually, because every time that we've wanted to move forward in a new way, we've been able to meet incredible people that could help us or who are already doing that, and we can just jump on that bandwagon and boost them up, and they can boost us up in return.
Right.
And so I think that's just been, I think it's something that it's been a great guiding force that we kind of like tried to fabricate, but also just came of itself. And so me and Jordan, we basically made a game plan, and we were like, our main goal is to basically get people to know this exists. And so that's what we did. So we reached out to universities, we reached out to other organizations, we reached out to the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, the Out Foundation and Circle, Equality Utah Pride Center. We reached out to news outlets, and we were basically just like, hey, we want people to know this exists, and it's for free. Like, it is able to be used right now. I don't know how we got to here, but that process has worked. So
I think it's been very like incremental, right? Like, it's been very, like I said, just you sort of just start and you just kind of
you just go
iterate, and you kind of figure it out. There was one part where, you know, I did something. I made this thing called like profile page, like dashboards, basically. And
right, yeah.
People, the idea was like people could sign in and they could save their favorite resources,
right.
and they could do like really cool things that was like personalized to them. And it tanked. It was like horrible. There was like some bug in the software that we use, and like people could sign up and then like it would not do anything for them. Like it would just like, it just wouldn't work.
They wouldn't be able to
as intended.
Yeah.
And
it was funny because that thing was very, I don't want to like negate the idea of like it doesn't have to be pretty in the first go around, but like
right.
It was still good, but it
didn't work. And it was kind of like a big, it was like an epic fail. Like it, I promoted this.
You put so much time and effort too, and like we tried.
I did like a giveaway. It was like a book giveaway for people who signed up, and it was like a big moment for us. We got tons of like people sharing it on Facebook, and we had tons of views about it, and it was like a big moment for me, and then it totally tanked. Funny enough, I think it was like beneficial, like, and you'll always have like some level of failure, right? Like, it's part of life, it's part of the process. And
I mean, Will Smith, I think he talked about like failing forward, and it's like you now know that opportunity is closed, like it's not going to work, so now you.
And that's what happened.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So we made another page called Dashboard, and it was supposed to be like all of the things in Utah, like in one spot where you kind of just like scroll through and get new, like the latest resources that we've added. We started introducing like news and events, and that was the next part of this app was like, okay, how do we make this, like, it was basically just a database of resources. It's very static. And we were like, how do we make it like engaging, and how do we like drive like value to people, right?
Like
and
a dynamic, and that people want to be here, and it's not just like a sitting thing.
Right. And like, what actually is valuable to the community, and how can we assist the community more?
Exactly.
And the idea was like, well, why don't we have like news and events? And, you know, that started with Dashboard. Now we've broken it out, and it's like its own separate page in the app now. It's like we populate events from all sorts of resources, and we either like manually look for them, or our partners can, you know, sync their calendars to our calendar. And you know, it really kicked off this new idea of like, how do we use this business and the technology that we have and the data that we have to improve the community and make it collaborative. I think there's some level of like red tape and like politics in some like LGBTQ organizations and how it functions. And I think like the idea was, let's just like make it like super collaborative and super open. Like our app doesn't say like, this person, like this resource or organization believes this way, so we're going to exclude them. We wanted people to have like this very open, dynamic place to where they could go and explore themselves and say like, this is what's for me.
Exactly.
And not like shield them from things that like have our biases interact with that.
And we talked about that a lot because we didn't want to be the person that decides what resources would be available or not. Like we talked about it at length of, you know, resources are to be stepping stones. Like eventually, you know, maybe one person will go to one. Like in your story, you said that you went to these different resources. I don't remember the first one, or the Seeking Happiness, or the
Men Finding Peace,
Men Finding Peace, to North Star, to Utah Hearth, and so on and so forth. And I think people's journeys are very similar. Like they find their stepping stones, and who is it to judge what those are, except for the person going through that journey. And so I know we talked about that, and we kept that very close to our values, is that we're not going to be the sifting factor of what we're going to show and we're not going to show. We're just going to show what's available, and give that decision up to the person going through their own journey.
Right. And just being like a collaborative space for people. And I think like that has been the next evolution of like, and we're no longer just one app. Like that is very much like the core part of what we do, but you know, we've expanded, and I think we've really are working to bring technology and data into the queer space and say like, how can we use this for good? How to benefit the community? For like
what do they need?
Yeah, and I think part of it too is like a lot of resource organizers, their community, like they're either like a community resource or their volunteers just come from the community members, and sometimes they don't have like the technical know-how to build a website. If you're just a community group, there's tons of them. There's these community groups that are just like, oh yeah, like we have FHE at our house, like on Monday nights, right? Like,
right.
And so they don't have like the technical know-how, and so the next step that we did was like, okay, we'll build out this landing page for you, and then we'll give you a platform to change and edit and build. Like we'll build out like the structure, and then we'll give you the tools to be able to do that. And so we now call that Portal.
Right.
And it's this place where like queer organizers can leverage the technology that we use, so that way they get these like really pretty dashboards, these really pretty pages, and they can do a lot of stuff. We actually worked with the Rainbow Collective and Equality Utah. We had a conference at the beginning of January, and the whole conference was housed on our app, and we were able to make a whole conference like run on an app. And so that was part of the idea, and I think that event was really impactful to me, and I think to you as well. But like,
it definitely set a trajectory of like what we need to do next,
right?
And what LGBTQ Utah is going to be in the future, as far as sustainability, as far as helping the community meet their needs.
Right. And I think one of the needs that we identified there really was that like queer organizers do need places to connect, do need spaces to really join together. In fact, the group that was in Salt Lake was like, you know what, we want to meet monthly, on Zoom meetings, and like get together and talk about it. And I think it's really impactful, like this idea of like a unified community, we're stronger together. Like I said, it's been like a recurring theme in our journey. And I think now we're working on Together, which is like a place for queer organizers to talk and discuss. There's chat rooms, there's forums, there's places where they can schedule Zoom meetings, and then we're going to have like help guides for them, whether it be like grant writing and all these different things. And like I think the trajectory of where we're going is like using technology, using data to benefit the community. And I think there's a lot more that we can do in that, and just say like, okay, like where are people looking for resources? Like, are they spending time in location search in their majority in, Utah County? Are they in Salt Lake County? What resources are they looking for? We break stuff down by category. So are people looking for, like, is there a really big spike in ideas for like social groups? Is it for mental health resources? Where are these like users distributed? Like, I think like we could show you a heat map of where there's LGBTQ resources in Utah, right? Like literally we are fortunate enough to have data on that. And I think as these other platforms grow out like Together, like we can say like, where do queer resource organizers need help as well? We have all these forums, all these questions, all these chat room topics that we can analyze in data and say like, how do we leverage this to benefit the community? I think that's really where we're like steering towards. And I'm just really excited to help the community, because for me, it was like such a, like, I wouldn't be where I am today, or like half the person that I am today, without the community. And just all the organizations like that are out there. Like I have gained things from every organization I've interacted with, and I just want to give back to the community, like I think it's it's something that like really impacts me, and I always just appreciate all that like I've been given from the community. And so this idea to give back and utilize the tools that we have, and I think anyone can do that, right? Like whether you're like, no matter where you're at, like you have talents and you have creative ideas and you have all these things that you can put forward to help. Maybe it's not even the queer space, right? Like maybe helping the queer community isn't where you want to put your time and effort to, and that's fine. Like,
right, yeah.
You don't have to have my journey. I think like, you can help wherever you can and make the world a better place, like a more connected and more loving place. And I think just like start, like that's the first thing is start.
And be messy with it.
Right.
Because I mean, I have the fondest, I mean, it's only been a half a year since you and I have been working together. And it's just, those first 3 months are just so fond memories for me, because we literally, like, we didn't really know entirely what we were doing. I'm sure we missed a lot of things that maybe we were supposed to do.
Right.
But like we just ran with it. We were excited and we were wanting to do good.
Right.
And then, and we just went for it.
Right.
And I mean, in this case, obviously there's a need, and people know that, people see that, and that really helped us. But I think people would be surprised how often there are going to be other people who are also wanting to help you build up. You know what I mean? And I'm what you just said reminded me of a conversation that I had with John Valdez from the Out Foundation. He was talking about, like, if he could give a piece of advice to people, to young people, he just said, start with one thing. There's so many things to be worried about or to be concerned in places where help is needed. And it can be overwhelming. Like, I'm in social work, I'm about to start my master's in social work, and there are a lot of social issues that our world faces, that our country faces, and looking at them from a big whole is very intimidating. But I really appreciate what John said, because he said just pick the one thing that you have a passion, an interest, and a desire to help in, and just go for it. And I time and time again, at least in our situation, that has been what's built us up to where we are now. And I agree with you. I really think it could be anyone. I mean, we do our meetings at a Beans and Brew. You know what I mean? Like, we started with me in a hammock and you in your house. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be anything grand. A lot of our meetings or work is done over the phone or in a car, or like after we get done with something. It's very informal.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think you or I or anyone particularly special in that we have more of something that others don't.
Right.
I think it's just important to start.
I think it's that passion.
Yeah,
that
I think
talk about too. Like, it's just like,
don't be afraid of that.
Right. Embrace the passion and embrace like follow your energy. And
follow your energy.
Like, if something energizes you, like, go after it and make it. Yeah. Like, I think, and that's helpful too. That gets people on board, right? Like, if you're passionate about something, people can see that. People can, if you're passionate about art, if you're passionate about gardening or whatever it is, even like social issues too, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever that is, like, whatever stirs your bones and makes you want to like get up and move and do stuff, like, go after it. And I think like anyone can do that, and everyone has. I won't say everyone, but like a lot of people have like feel that drive somewhere. They feel that energy, and it's gonna be really silly, but it reminds me of in Halloween Town, where the grandma's like, like the secret to magic is like wanting something and letting yourself have it. Like she says that to Marnie, and I think like that's been something, like, if you want something, like, give yourself permission to have it. Like, go out and get it. Go do the work. Like,
you're allowed.
Yeah, you're allowed to like want that thing, and like you can achieve it. And like that mindset of like, okay, now like let yourself have it. Whatever that is, whatever it takes to get there, like just start and iterate and work towards it. And like, it's not, you don't have to do it tomorrow. You don't have to do it like in a month, in a year. Like we're building up, and it's been a year, right?
Yeah, it's been a whole year, and the last 6 months has been like our biggest increase.
And I thought about this idea like 2 years before, right? Like,
exactly.
It's just like, just start and get going, and things will work out. And I think there's a lot of good that comes from people just embracing the energy and just going for it. And so,
especially, I mean, and even looking at it this way, like we just talked about our origin stories, right? Like, you didn't wake up one day like randomly and was like, I need to do this. Like there's context to your story. There's context to mine. And there's context to other people. And so it just speaks to the fact that it's a process. And it's going to be a long one, maybe it'll be a short one, maybe it'll be one full of failure, maybe it'll have more success than not, but really, like you said, just anyone could do good. And they should try. And I think also people would be surprised, at least for me. I guess I shouldn't project, but for me, I was very surprised at how quickly we were able to get people who were on board with us. And I do think part of it was because of our excitement. Like we were just so stoked to get going and get your baby out there, you know what I mean? And I think people saw that on top of the need that it's already there, because chances are the thing that you're excited about, the thing that you're passionate about, there's a need.
Right.
Well, thanks, man. This is awesome.
Yeah. so straight. You have to hug. Okay.
Yeah. So I need to write home.
Could you? Yes. Okay.